Músicas sospechosas. Un programa para Radio Contrabanda, 91.4 de la FM en Barcelona o en contrabanda.org. Músicas sospechosas. En directo desde la Plaza Raval de Barcelona. That was Come As You Are, the first of the 20 songs that today will take us to the sound of Seattle. Welcome to this new session of Suspicious Musics, or Músicas Sospechosas if you want to listen to us in Spanish. We are today at the studios of Radio Contrabanda with the person that is going to take us through this journey, a journey through more than 10 years of music and songs that has marked a whole generation and a whole style of musicians and sounds. I'm talking about Slavko Mitric. He is the person that will let us know all the secrets about grunge and what happened during those years in Seattle. Good afternoon, Slavko.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Welcome. This is your house. This is the first time that we have you as a speaker. We hope to have you soon as a musician. Slavko Mitric is a musician, as I have just said. He's a composer, a guitarist, also a vocalist, a dreamer, and the leader band of the Goozers, and one portion of the brains of Los Pacientes, two bands right now developing in Barcelona that I hope you will have the opportunity to listen to them soon live. Okay, so we started today with Come As You Are with no makeup, no. This song was presented to us by Nirvana. We will speak about them, of course, a lot later during this program. For the next 2 hours, we will be traveling, as I said, over 5 movements through what was one of the most outstanding music movement in the United States of America of the last century. We started with Nirvana, but we have, as I said, Dr. Slavko Mitric here to take us, to drive us, to show us the light over this journey. Slavko, thanks for being here again. Let's start with this conversation. You wanted to tell us something. You wanted to tell us what happened before all this grunge movement.
Exactly. Well, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. As far as the grunge movement, everybody knows the 4 most popular bands: Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what inspired them, and then a few other bands that were very important for the movement before those bands or during the time of those bands in Seattle.
Perfect. So if you want to, we can kick off this journey with a little bit of, as you said, inspiration. Do you think it's the right moment to listen to Purple Haze as part of this?
It's always a good moment to listen to Jimi Hendrix.
So let's go to listen to the one and only, to Jimi Hendrix. Also, he was from Seattle, right?
Yes, that's basically the reason why. What gave inspiration to all of those bands coming out of Seattle was that there was one that became very, very famous, obviously, Jimi Hendrix. And he was from Seattle, a place that's very isolated in the United States. So that kind of gave a little bit of motivation to everybody that it is possible to do something.
Perfect. So let's fly. This is Purple Haze. From the album Are You Experienced? Jimi Hendrix, for you. That was Jimi Hendrix. How was that, Slavko?
Well, there's not enough words to describe that, but obviously great influence on anybody that came out after Jimmy musically, and a lot of the guitar players in the grunge, especially Pearl Jam's guitar player Mike McGready. You can hear a lot of influence in Jimi Hendrix and pretty much everybody else.
Okay, so it was not only in the grunge style. He influenced a lot of musicians, a lot of music styles. Although he was a beast on his own, no. But so he planted the seed. These guys from Seattle in that times of the mid-80s, we are talking about mid-80s in Seattle, they used to listen to this genius called Jimi Hendrix, and he planted a seed on them, obviously, musically speaking, but also spiritually speaking and artistically speaking, right?
Exactly. And being from the hometown of Seattle, just basically gave them the hope to that one day, you know, any other band or musician can make it from there, because before that was basically impossible.
I see. Impossible in what terms? What do you mean?
Well, I mean that nobody, there's because of the geographical position of Seattle, so most of the big concerts that were happening, they would only go to the north of California. They would never go further into Portland or to Seattle. So a lot of people living there, and they never got to see a lot of good music that was going on at the time live. And also just had that feeling of being so isolated from rest of the country.
I see. So we have the seeds planted by Jimi Hendrix, and you also wanted to listen to something by Sonic Youth. We have he has chosen, because actually this is a selection of music curated by Slavko Mitric, as I said, and he has some interest in us for listen to Teenage Riot by Sonic Youth. Shall we go for it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this is Sonic Youth, and this album was Daydream Nation.
That's martial start to at least just give us a clue. Oh, here it comes. I know it's someone I knew. Teenage riot in a public station, gonna fight and tear it up in a hibernation for you. Now I see it. I think I'll leave it out of the way. Now I can hear you. It's not clear why you make the way. Looking for a ride to your secret location where the kids are setting up a feast celebration for you. Got a popcorn and a drum and a hammer that's rocking and a chord and a pedal and a lock that'll do me for now. It better work out. I hope it works out my way. 'Cause it's getting kinda quiet in my city head. It takes a teenage riot to get me out of bed right now. You better look it. We're gonna shake it up to him. That's the hero. He paint a zero on his hand. Everybody's sound is grounded. Everybody wants to be proud to choose. So who's taking blame for the stormy weather? You're never gonna stop all the teenage leather. It's time to go round. A one-man show that teaches how to feel. We're off the streets now, and back on the road on the riot trail.
That was Sonic Youth with Teenage Riot. The third music that you listened today as inspiration to what was going to be one of the most important music movements of the last of the previous century. What is that Sonic Youth? Why do you think it's so important in this grunge influence movement?
Well, I think they brought this. Well, they're from New York, so they're not from Seattle. But all those bands, most of them were inspired by them. I mean, as you can tell, it's very experimental, kind of dark, progressive, but it has that the true indie sound. You know, what later on, what we know nowadays as basically still being very important in Seattle.
So. That was the beginning of that thing called indie music to start happening. Is it the same movement as grunge, or is grunge part of indie, or is it part of the same independent music movement?
Well, I think the grunge is part of the independent music movement. It just, I think the term came out sometime in 1987, the first time it was used. I believe they were talking about the Deep Six album, which included Soundgarden, Green River, Melvins, Skin Yards, Malfunction. And that's the first time that the term grunge comes about. But of course, before that, all of those bands, all they really wanted to do was to be, to be part of the independent music, which is I think a bigger movement in general.
Understand. So that means probably or mainly music made out of the big channels, the big commercial channels, or the big multinational records company, right? Doing their own independent projects and finance them themselves, right?
Exactly, and that's where Sub Pop comes in as a record label that was basically focused on the bands from Seattle, and they were giving them opportunities to play and to record and to. So that basically in that region people knew about them, but nobody ever could imagine that it could become something that the whole world would be listening to.
We will talk about Sub Pop. Slavko is going to explain to us on the next stage of this journey that will take, as always, this program is 2 hours long. So, but we are still taking off, trying to understand from which route and which waters did all these group of depressed men, mainly in Seattle, drink from, right? To be able to construct and to create and to come up with such a sound. For the first time, we saw different aesthetics musically and aesthetically. The music and the musicians looked different. As Slavko will take us through that journey. But as I said, we are still taking off. So we are going to go to the next song. Slavko wanted us to listen to Neil Young. We're going to listen to Rocking in the Free World. Is a song that I love from an album absolutely amazing called Freedom. So I'm very glad that all these Seattle youngsters were listening to Neil Young because he's one of the fathers, right?
Exactly, and we all know Neil Young from his early days in the 60s and 70s, but then later on he came out with this song that actually kind of sounds like the grunge sound that came out later. I believe it's from 89, more or less.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's enjoy Rocking in the Free World. young, unnecessary father we wanted to listen to today. What is your saying about the influence of the next band that you have prepared for us? We're going to listen to the Pixies. Why have you chosen them?
Well, Pixies were great influence for, well, as far as I know, Nirvana, because of the progressive kind of punk style that they had. They're from Boston. And I know that they played a huge role in how Nirvana sounded. If you listen to them, a lot of people would say that it's a mix of Beatles and Pixies in a way.
Okay, yeah. Interesting mix. All right. Alrighty, so let's listen to Gush Away by an album quite original. Well, everything is original by Pixies, to my taste. This was Do Little, and we're going to listen to 2 minutes of this song called, as I said, Gush Away.
Gouge away. You can gouge away. Stay all day if you want to.
Those were the Pixies. You will have to go your own way if you want to. This is what he was saying. With that, I think we have covered the first part of this journey. Slavko wanted to talk about the roots and the waters from which these great musicians that were developing this phenomenon music called grunge was happening at that time. We're talking about mid-80s, and we have gone now from the introductions and the fathers of the movement to what you wanted to present as the sub-pop movement, right?
Exactly. But before that, I would just like to mention that there were obviously more influences, but that we don't have time today to go over, but the Stooges, Iggy Pop, all the movement, basically that was punk and post-punk influenced a lot, but there's not enough time today to go over all of them.
Well, but I think it's important. Yeah, thanks for Thanks for explaining that, because obviously there is a lot of punk in that music. We can hear that, and also I wanted to ask you: is metal
and also metal,
metal,
of course.
okay.
Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, hugely important for sounds of Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, and yeah.
All righty. Okay, so what happened then? Mid '80s, Seattle, something was happening. Sub pop.
Well, there was a lot of bands playing. Also a lot of places where they could play in Seattle. A lot of clubs, and in those days it wasn't just reggaeton and all the stuff that we hear nowadays, but there was actually bands playing organic music, and so they had opportunity to basically, as far as Sub Pop, took advantage of that, realizing that there's a lot of talent, and so they started producing music. And I mentioned earlier the Deep Six, and I believe the next song that we'll talk about is from one of those bands that was called Malfunction, that later turned into Mother Love Bone, and the next song is Stargazer, and then after that, Mother Love Bone turns into Pearl Jam. So
Perfect.
So that's a pretty interesting connection.
It is. Do you want to listen to Stargazer now?
I think so.
Perfect. So let's listen to Mother Love Bone.
come back again.
That was Mother Love Bone, an amazing album we were discussing with Slavko right now. That album called Apple, It's Gorgeous. So here we are. We are in the middle. We are getting there. We're still appreciating the sub pop culture, and Slavko wanted to take us to another stage now.
Yes, the next song is called Hunger Strike by the Temple of the Dog, which was basically a band formed of members of Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. That was dedicated to the death of Mother Love Bone singer, the last song we heard. And the whole album is dedicated to him. And that's where you hear Eddie Vedder and Chris Cornell sing together in Hunger Strike.
Perfect. So we're going to listen to Hunger Strike by Temple of the Dog. That was Temple of the Dog and Hunger Strike, a beautiful song, very, very tough lyrics. This is illustrating a little bit what was happening in the mid-80s in Seattle. What is next for you, Slavko? What do you want?
Well, next we have Screaming Trees, which was a band that was one of the first ones to be signed on a major label, but they never quite made it as far as like the most famous four. But they were just they were as equally important to the sound in general. And the song is called "Nearly Lost You," and the singer of this band later on forms a very, very nice solo career. His name is Mark Lanigan, and he's still making music to this day.
He nearly lost you. That was a beautiful voice. Slavko was saying that the voice of this singer has improved, actually, right?
Yes, I think he's gotten, over the years, he's gotten better, and it's a lot deeper now.
Okay.
You know,
So
it was deep back in the day, but...
you kind of, you admire his work either as a composer, guitarist, but also as a vocalist, right?
Yes, I mean, he has well, we both of us have a deep voice. So for me, listening to him sing and the way he approaches singing and his presence on stage has been a big influence.
So what is the album that you recommend? Some of his latest works, are you familiar? Do you follow? Do you still listen to him?
Yes, his solo album called Bubblegum is probably one of the best ones he has.
We're talking about Mr.
Mark Lanigan.
Lanigan, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe he lives in Ireland now, and he's still making music. He comes out with a few albums a year, I think.
Okay.
And collaborates with a lot of people. He's done stuff with. Well, he actually played in Queens of the Stone Age. He's done stuff with PJ Harvey. He never stops. It's like a machine.
Very good.
But all of his, and especially his live, anything you can find on YouTube, Mark Lanigan live, is incredible.
Okay, so we open that door for those who want to continue exploring the beauties of music made by this musician. We were also discussing with Slavko what is that makes this sound so particular or so special, because all these 4 bands that we have listened to, they all sound very different, and they came up with a very original type of sound, each one of them. But they do have something in common, right? And it has something to do with the way they play the guitars, but also something else, right?
Well, I think it has to do with the rain. You know, it rains a lot in Seattle.
So they spend a lot of time together, no?
Yeah, but there is also this loose guitar playing, a lot of distortion, and the drumming too. You know, use of the toms, that kind of they might all sound really different, but then there is this one thing that unites them, and you can definitely tell that they're from that region, no? Understand.
So, you have share with us what you wanted us to understand as the basis or the foundations of the grunge movement. That was a very beautiful, illustrative selection of songs to describe sub pop. Very beautiful, all of them. I wouldn't be able to say if I like Mother Love Bone is that album favorite. is it's magic, Apple, and but you have shown me so many others. This was just a selection, so we can enjoy the introduction to what comes next, and what comes next is probably the most famous cover of an album of the whole history of music. We will talk about the baby and the dollar note later. No, later.
Yeah. That's really recent. You know?
That's very recent. You're right. We're talking about these guys. You know them. If you are older than 6 months old, you know them.
Exactly.
That was the anger and the energy and the voice and the what is this phenomenon that we all experienced the first time that we heard that drumming and that song, right? We're talking about Nirvana. What is that? What is that you are going to discover us about them?
Well, no, it's something that you already said, but I talked to a lot of people about the first time they heard the song. You know, I remember the first time I heard it. It was years later because, you know, it was during the Yugoslavian war. We didn't have all the newest stuff coming, so it came about 2-3 years later. But I remember seeing the video and listening to the song and just thinking, what the hell was that, you know, and wanting to hear more, you know, and repeat it. And pretty much everybody shares that same story that, like, you know, they were at some party somewhere around 91 or 92 and it came on the radio or somebody played it and just everybody stopped and said, what is that? What was that? You know, can we hear it again or hear more? So it's like it changed the world, you know, at the time.
Absolutely. It changed the world. And I guess this is the time to talk about the grunge movement, if there is one. If we want to use tags, we're going to use that tag. Nirvana was not the only band and was not the best or was not the biggest or was not the longest. It doesn't matter, but it created an effect in all of us that only those musicians that leave a mark in history of music leave, right? So this is what we all felt with them. There were more bands, we will talk about them later, but the grunge movement was about music, was about anger, was about despair, was about specific aesthetics, musical aesthetics, but also the look of, you know, the clothing and the way they would, the whole scenery around it.
Very important.
Maybe you want to explain this to us, because it was a whole fashion trend and the whole, no?
Well, the 80s were full of, you know, bands that were hair bands, glam metal bands that were focused a lot on their looks and not so much on their music. And I think that was kind of a protest of all the grunge bands, that what they wanted to say is that we don't care what we look like, we want you to listen to our music. And I think that's pretty important. You know, and that's how, you know, that grungy look comes about, you know, and then mixed with that type of music, you know, it really fits. And Seattle, of course. Yeah.
Do you think Nevermind is one of the albums of the century in terms of grunge music, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely for the impact. I mean, it's not one of my favorite albums, but I think that what it created was this awareness that there is something special happening in Seattle. And I think that's important.
Do you want to listen to Alice in Chains now? Yeah.
Now we're talking about my favorite
Yes.
band from that.
So tell us what is so important for you?
Well, as we said before, all the bands were different in their style, and Alice in Chains is probably the heaviest. It's more heavy metal than the other bands, but they have this really complex harmony with Jerry Cantrell, the guitar player, and the amazing voice of Lane Staley happening. And then you have a drummer who's not a typical, drummer that does the simple beat, but he does all the other very complex patterns, and a really good bass. Overall, it's just an excellent band. But it is probably the darkest and the heaviest.
In the heavies,
Yeah.
all right. So let's listen to this beautiful song called Boot by Alice in Chains.
little fuck. Oh, but we unleashed the lion. Gnashed his teeth and bit the recessed lady's breast. How could I forget? And he hit me with the surprise left. My jaw left hurting. Ooh, dropped wide open. Just like the day. Oh, like the day I heard. Daddy didn't give affection, no. And the boy was something that mommy wouldn't wear. Came down me the wicked. Oh, this world tell me spoken.
Well, after Alice in Chains, we decided to go ahead with Jeremy by Pearl Jam. An amazing song talking about something that until then nobody has had ever dared to discuss, which is bullying and suicide and other depressive related diseases and other ways of torturing society. This was the message of this song. We want to take the opportunity of this song to discuss lyrics, no? Because the message, as I said, is the first time that we get that type of tragedy and depression and youngsters not wanting to live and not complaining, because if he understood well, that was not it is not protest music. Well, obviously it protests in a way, right? Because it reflects a system that is actually strangling them. But what is your say? What is your take on this, Slavko?
Well, I think, like you said, it's not necessarily protest, but it's consciousness. You know, people being aware that, as far as music-wise, before that, everybody was talking about the war or the love or ballads of romantic songs, but nobody really went this deep into what it is, being bullied or feeling depressed, or like the next song, it's Man in the Box, or feeling like somebody in the box in our society that we live in. So yeah, those guys really, there was a really strong message behind, and I think a lot of people don't realize it necessarily because they see these guys that, they do, the sound is pretty depressing, no? But behind that, I think there's a really beautiful message, that you're not alone. If you are going through these things, that there's somebody else who understands you. At least for me, that's what I got out of it, apart from really good musicians and very good song structure and chords, and, was the message, to not to feel alone.
Music was again the healer.
Yeah.
It's not the first, not the last time. And again, the glue that connected all that insatisfaction feeling, no, by all the youngsters. We're talking about, for the first time, if I'm not mistaken, it's the first time that we put a name like X generation to a whole generation of people. After that, then we follow with the Y and Z and millennials and post-millennials and stuff. But the X generation was, for me, the first time that I saw that socially music had shaped the tag of a whole social decadence and economic and a spiritual and physical decadence, because there was also an involvement of very hard drugs. We will talk about. So we have talked about these problems with mental health and suicides and stuff. But heroin was part of this whole game, right? Again, so yeah, this generation, this social movement meant a lot for pop music in the Western world, but not only. We were doing research for this program. Well, I found out, because Slavko already knew this, but there has been traces of grunge music in Japan and in Asia, and it's a whole current. It's a whole style in its own name, right? So let's listen to Man in the Box, the other song by Alice in Chains that Slavko wanted to show us today, precisely because of that, because of the message of desperation, but also of denouncing the madness of a system that makes you feel like inside a box where you cannot breathe or you cannot live. This is Alice in Chains.
face no one knows. Has the face, lies the snake in the sun in my disgrace. Boiling heat, summer stench. Neath the black, the sky looks dead. Call my name through the cream, and I'll hear you scream again. Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Won't you come? Stood a rain, cold and damp. Steal the warm wind, tired friend. Times are gone for honest men. Sometimes far too long for snakes. In my shoes, walking sleep. In my youth, I pray to keep heaven send hell away. No one sings like you anymore. Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you hang my head, drown my fear, till you all just disappear. Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Black hole sun, won't you come? Wash away the rain. Black hole sun, won't you come? Won't you come? Won't you come?
Life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being eternal. That was something that John Paul Sartre said, and I think it's pretty much what that's the idea that might have been rounding in the heads of these musicians and composers we are talking about today. Definitely, that was the case of Soundgarden. We just listened to Black Hole Sun after Man in the Box by Alice in Chains, the depressive, the decadence, and the quiet, grey type of messages and atmosphere that these musicians would live in. Slavko wanted to discuss this idea of depressive thought and decadence in the grunge movement, because we are getting to the decadence of itself, right?
Yes. Well, most people know what happened with Kurt Cobain in '94. Which is just about the time that, a little bit after that, the Black Hole Sun and Soundgarden came out with a huge album. And that was a shock to the whole world, and that basically kind of starts the decline. But there's also another death that was really important, but in a way it inspired all of them, was the death of Andy Wood, who was the singer of the Mother Love Bone, which later inspired the album of The Temple of the Dog, also inspired the song of Alice in Chains, Wood. And then in general, because that happened back in '91, it was just a feeling of they realized, that there was a big problem about drug use in Seattle at the time, and we see it later on in '94 with Kurt Cobain. And then most recently, sadly, but most recently with Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell's passing just a few years ago. So that's basically, I don't think there's a better way to get into the decline of, the sound. And if there was a way to kind of feel or see where this could have gone if it wasn't for these type of disasters, it was probably the Mad Season, which is the next song, Long Gone Day. That's probably one of my favorite albums of this time period, is where Lane Staley and Mike McGready from Pearl Jam and from Alice in Chains got together and made an album. And you could see kind of, this music or this sound evolving into something new. And it happened on this album, but it, of course, after that, there wasn't much released, but that was the only album they did.
Okay, so let's listen to Long Gone Day. With this, we are transiting now to the end of the grunge music movement in Seattle.
So much blood, I'm starting to drown. Runs from cold to colder. Time to time, the sky's coming down. You and open veins, God knows I'm gone. first time the place was safe. The music that we made, the wind has carried all of that away. Long gone day. Whoever said we wash away with the rain? So many tears, I'm starting to drown. The rains in heavens all come down. Silver spoons to fix a crown. The luckless ones are broken. Fears and lies for answers. You and open flames. God knows I'm gone. And I just want you to come home.
That was probably the best unplugged, according to Slavko, in the history of grunge music, of actually the whole music in the world, baby. That was Alice in Chains, No Excuses, immediately after Long Gone Day by Mad Season, because we wanted kind of close off the chapter of the decline and fall of the grunge music of Seattle with this song, because Slavko thought that was the idea, no?
Yes, and also to quickly just to mention Lane Staley and the importance of him being such a great vocalist. This was the last song, No Excuses, was one of his last concerts with Alice in Chains before he died, and he was that basically falls in line with the decline, obviously, but yeah, his voice is still missed to this day, even though Alice in Chains, they have a new singer and they're still making music, but everybody misses Lane.
Everybody misses. Well, that could be a good title for this podcast. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Cool. Let's. Why not? You will get the podcast in the next couple of weeks, probably. So don't worry if you missed the live program that we are recording at the studios of Contrabanda Radio downtown in Barcelona. You will get a 2 hours podcast with Dr. Slavko Mitric's advices and music reflections. Well, that was the rise and the fall of the sound of Seattle. In roughly 13 years, the sound that revolutionated the pop music all over the world, and that which still today gets continuation all over the planet. We are going to talk about that actually, right? What has happened with post grunge and with the internationalization of this music style.
Yes. Well, as far as actually during the grunge movement, so it wasn't just Seattle, but there was bands like that we'll get into a little bit later, like Smashing Pumpkins, that were from Chicago. They had the grunge sound. Also Stone Temple Pilots. Even you can hear some of the grunge in Cranberries. And then later on, went to Australia. I think it was Bush and basically the rest of the 90s, there were a lot of bands that were continuing the sound, and even though it seemed like the Seattle ones, just turned off after 94 or 96 in this case.
Mm-hmm. So you have chosen, let's say, 5 more songs. We'll see if we have the time to go through all of them completely, or we need to cut them off, but at least we get an idea of what is that grunge has turned into. If you want, we can listen to Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots, which is the first one that you have recommended.
Yeah.
Is there anything you like especially about this band or this song?
Well, they were always kind of they're not from Seattle, they're from California, but they were not considered in the same basically with the other 4, but they were basically if you could say the second most important sound happening between Smashing Pumpkins and Stone Temple Pilots. So I think that they were carrying that same style, just being from another place. So and it's pretty important, what I think they got to a lot of people as far as popularity wise, and a lot of people on them.
Let's listen to Stone Temple Pilots then, the continuation of the Seattle sound, out of Seattle and out of the Seattle's time. That's the interstate love song proposed for this selection. We have some others. We also have Zombie by the Cranberries. You wanted to mention this specific album and band because of the importance as well, right? In the post grunge era.
Also because they're from Ireland, and I think they got to hear that same type of attitude in the sound. And during the war in Ireland, and it's a song that still to this day I think I hear it all the time, and it has a huge message, for our generation and everybody. Still, because the wars haven't stopped, so yeah.
We're still zombies, and the wars are still there. Let's listen to the Cranberries, one of the most impactant albums of our times. That is the Cranberries denouncing the nonsense of war with the album that also was a milestone in the history of pop music of the latest century. That was an example of grunge happening outside Seattle and outside the States when the movement was already finished in the place of origin. You also, Slavko, you also wanted to discuss the Smashing Pumpkins' importance in this, no, in keeping up this sound.
Yes, most. I believe that around the same time that Nevermind made the explosion in the world. One of the other bands that was making a lot of noise was Smashing Pumpkins, and they're from Chicago. And there was a bit of a rivalry between the fans, the true fans of Nirvana and true fans of Smashing Pumpkins at the time. But they're still making music. They're still relevant. Their sounds probably changed a little bit, but they were pretty influential also.
And you are obviously fan of the two of them, right?
Yes, not so much Smashing Pumpkins. I've listened to them always because they were always playing on radio, but I didn't dig that deep into there. And I lived in Chicago for 15 years, so it's a little, I should have. But
okay, let's listen to a quite powerful song called 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins then. Probably the name of this album is one of the most beautiful of this collection of grunge music from Seattle and beyond. Melancholy and the infinite sadness. Of course. That was the Smashing Pumpkins with a very much clear, clean and knitted sound, no? Compared to the previous bands that we have been listening we have been listening to today. So that was the example of the Smashing Pumpkins and the song 1979. What is now important is that we start saying goodbye or see you next week. But before that, Slavko wanted to close off with some of your words.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to mention KEXP Radio. That's still, to me, the reference point to listen to independent music, and I still think Seattle is the capital of the world in that. And you can find it on YouTube, on any channels, and you can find new bands that are doing really interesting things nowadays. And I wanted to thank Sarah for inviting me to the program.
Anytime. This is your house. We will be changing the building, but the spirit and the soul of this radio is here, and you are more than welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Also, if for those who want to see more references, Slavko shared with me a very beautiful podcast program. I think it's 5 programs called Breaking Waves by Jam Bass. There you can also deep dive and explore and continue learning about what happened in Seattle and what is the legacy, the history, and the importance of grunge music for all of us. So from my side, of course, saying Dr. Mitric, thank you very much for your knowledge and for sharing this beautiful selection of tracks and songs that you can listen again live on Friday, next Friday from 8 to 10. That's very early in the morning. If you want to connect to contrabanda.org, you will be able to play there. That's going to be streaming. And otherwise, we will share with you a beautiful podcast in the next couple of weeks. As always, we will place this program on our Mixcloud channel. Música Sospechosa, Suspicious Musics. This is Sarah Ardite talking to you one more Tuesday, live radio from the heart of Barcelona city to the world. That I wish that the music stay on your side, and we're gonna leave you with the last beautiful song of this afternoon. Slavko has decided to say goodbye with a song called "Go with the Flow," which is basically our anthem. We Go with the Flow by Queens of the Stone Age. This has been a journey to, from and beyond the grunge movement music of Seattle. See you, listening to you next week, and arrivederci. Ciao.